All are welcome here at Reverend Christian Sorensen's weekly Joyous Series podcast here at www.joyouspodcast.com. Today's message was recorded January 17th, 2016, and is titled The Basics Part 1, subtitled The Thing Itself, Knowing It, Feeling It. There's still time to join us in Dr. Christian Sorensen's Foundation of the Science of Mind class Tuesday evenings here in Encinitas, California. Or for the first time, you can take the class live wherever you are. Visit www.seasidecenter.org/education to find out more. Join us in Encinitas, California sometime, where great music, a spirited message, and a joyful, loving community await you.
Feel the joy, feel the peace, and the comfort of home, 'cause all are welcome here. Yes, all are welcome
And so, here we are embarking upon our wonderful journey into the basic ideas of the science of mind. And I always feel the best place to start is actually where Ernest started his whole book that became the textbook. It's called The Science of Mind. And he started with what's called the thing itself. That's the first chapter. The thing itself is like God, which is kind of blasphemy if you come from a traditional world saying God is an it or a thing. But, you know, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's knowing it. It's feeling it. Religions for thousands of years have held a concept of God that is outside of themselves. And what's different about religious science is that there is a belief that spirit is something that is within us, that is expressing through us. And actually, you know, your concept of God, or the concept in the global consciousness in a sense, has evolved. It used to be God was in the elements, right? God was thunder, lightning, volcanoes, earth, wind, fire. Yeah. That's what God was. That's what people used to pray to. And then it emerged to Abraham having a conversation with another tribesman. That was God. And so it evolved to God being a tribesman. And eventually God became this wrathful being whose wrath would come down upon you. And then, you know, it emerged to this king. You know, it sat on a throne with his book in the clouds, scratching his beard. That anthropomorphic being that was believed in. And then he emerged into a parent, a loving parent. Well, what has happened, or the era that we're in, I feel anyway, is the emergence of the concept that God is all things. That it is infinite, that it is absolute, that it is everywhere, and you are of that. Because there cannot be something other than that which is infinite. And so what we get to do is work on coming to feel that what I am is spirit expressing. And what's interesting with this concept of recognizing God, and starting with God's the best place. You know, it's all about experiencing the presence. You know what religion will do? Religion will tell you about God. Religion will give you the rules and the how-tos on how to be with God or how to behave. What spirituality does, and that's what we talk about Centers for Spiritual Living, is that spirituality will point you to have the experience of God. You know, it will have you walk along the beach, and what does it feel like when you see a whale spout, and all of a sudden you go, wow, and you have this experience that there's a power and a presence and there's something magnificent, and I'm one with that. And what's interesting, you know, for me, because I just started the foundation class, and you're still more than welcome to join, is we know that God is within, right? We can say that. That's the intellectual part. We got it. But I'm talking about the experience of what that means, and what shows up in the classes is how we pray. Because people pray to God. They pray to God. That's something outside of ourselves. And that is what is different about this new thought philosophy, is that his spirit is not something outside that I pray to, I ask, I beseech, I hope, I wheel and deal as if I got something God doesn't have. No, it's like, it's recognizing what it really means to experience that God is everything and I am of that. I begin to speak with an authority in my life and my world. Ernest Holmes, he talks about God on the very first page, and the concept has evolved. I mean, they used to think this pantheon of gods was like the real deal. I mean, that was God was that. And then it moved beyond that to other concepts. But what happens is we take on this sense that it's the truth. And it's a lot of the things that we hold just may not be. And so what we want to do is point you to have the experience of what the divine is. Ernest talks about the very first sentence, the first page. He says that I believe that someday science and religion will walk hand in hand from the visible into the invisible. See, we're not here denying this world or science or the physics of it all. But what we believe is that there is a correlation, that they come together and we're not bound by it. And so he writes from this first page that to suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create us in bondage and leave us bound would be to dishonor the creative power, which we call God. So if you're experiencing bondage, challenge, difficulty, it's not like you got to pray to something outside of yourself. It's about coming to recognize the truth of your own being and knowing the freedom of who you are. To suppose that God could make us as an individual without leaving us to discover ourselves would be to suppose an impossibility. Individuality must be spontaneous. It can never be automatic, for the seed of freedom must be planted in the innermost being of us. You got that? You got to be left spontaneous to discover. If you're told, okay, this is your perfect universe now, live as I've set it up, that's not freedom, self-choice, self-expression. So in our doingness of life, we can create the upsets, the challenges, the learning experiences, and the opportunities to have those great ahas. But we've got to recognize those difficulties are not God ordained, and it's not the bondage. It says the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage isn't God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. We feel this in our spirit, don't you? The truth points to freedom under law. You got that? The truth points to freedom, and there is a law that responds. It responds. That's like it's done unto you as you believe. The law, you can't see it, but you can see what it does. You can see the results of it. And so as you begin to work in consciousness, and you come to recognize the totality of spirit, as you come to recognize, as Emerson talks about, the absolute, as you come to know what truly omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotence means, as you begin to have that experience of what that presence is, you move yourselves out of the constraints, out of where you had been. And as you begin to emerge your consciousness to a higher place of being, you begin to free yourself from where you were. You know, the old analogy of people thinking in Europe anyways that the earth was flat until, 1492 when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered, you know what, you don't fall off the end of the earth. And it wasn't in 1492 that all of a sudden they created the Americas. You know, that we were here. But there was something that denied the individuals from moving out into a further exploration or evolution of what was possible. Oh yeah, well we know, of course the earth is not flat. But we hold on to some beliefs that keep us bound. Judge Thomas Troward, who influenced Ernest about the law aspect of things, he said, we're not bound by precedent. We're not bound by our old beliefs. You know, so just because the Roman Empire believed in the pantheon of gods didn't make it as so. There was the evolution to the next stage. And the religion and the spirituality evolved. But what happens is you've got to be willing to let go of what carried you to that next place, because God is infinite. God didn't just, here I am on the shore, and that's it. There's more. We have to be willing to move on. And what has turned into our religion today, where there is as much belief in that as there was in that pantheon of gods. There was as much belief as there was in that anthropomorphic being sitting in the clouds with a sense of judgment. We have as much faith now as the individuals had faith in their God and their belief at that time. We have that kind of faith that we put today in science. Science is the new religion. People will say, this is the absolute truth. I am the body, and it is a matter in this physical universe, and there's cause and effect, and there's chemical response, and this is the truth, and science proves it. And they have a faith in their science at the same level people put it into a God outside of themselves. And so we've got to come to recognize, I'm more than this body. I am the thing itself. And then I got to free myself from my past patterns in order to experience the greater emergence in a relevant kind of way as my very experience as I walk through this world in which I live. And so what I want to help you do this morning, I want to help you with the basics, is to be able to do that and to let go of what it is we've held on. There's a story of an alcoholic who woke up in a hotel room and there were 2 doors out, and he got up and decided he was going to take this one, and he went out that door and someone hit him and boom, out he went. And so when he woke up again, he saw 2 doors that led out. So he decided he was going to take the same door, and he went out the same door, and boom, somebody hit him and down he went again. He woke up again in the same hotel room, and there were the same 2 doors. And he decided he was going to take the same door again, and he went out that door, and nobody hit him. So he went looking for the person that hit him last time. All of a sudden, you're given a safe passage, and what do? I'm going to go figure out what messed up my world. I'm going to go attack that person. I'm going to go hold on to my story. I'm going to go make it, whatever it is, I'm going to make it, as opposed to allowing it to be what it can be, which is Spirit expressing. Spirit is there for you. And when you got some upset going on in your world, I want you to know that you're loved. And that everything you're going through, everything, not some of the things, everything you're going through has its purpose for you. So hang in there. Because what you do with it is what casts the direction and the course and the experiences in your life. We have upsets. It comes with doing this thing called humanness. Yeah. And I found that limitations, they're like for me, pins in my couch. Or bumps or lumps in my pillow that just keeps me from getting too complacent and too comfortable and losing sight of the deep vision that is stirring in my soul. There is something that says, you know what, you got to get out there, and why don't you just work on getting just a little bit comfortable in the discomfort so you can begin to know the comfort in the change that is always going on in this world, because you have become confident and connected with something inside of you that is great, that is wonderful, that is powerful. You're able to see something in the midst of your discomfort or your downtime. You begin to catch an inkling of the thing itself. Thing, spirit, God, call it what you want, and you recognize it's not really outside. It's been here the whole time. It's Christian who is dragging along the old stories. I got to go find who messed me up. You know, who messed me up is gone from God's world. The truth is, it's never been part of God's world. It has only been part of my world. And when I'm done dragging it forward in my life and choose to allow my fresh possibilities to catch fire in my soul, then I will pull forth the universal expression in all of its absolute expression in everything that will bring about that vision, that fulfillment, that success, that joy, that abundance, that love, because those are the qualities of God for which we have all been created in our life. There's a story told of a sacred mountain in a village where people spent their life looking for it. And this mountain towered above the village, but they were all looking for it, which meant, the heads down with their maps, reading their books, going to their gurus, telling them about it. It was their religion. They were told about it. They were not having the experience. They heard of this lake at the end of the village that they would go to, and they said you could see the mountain. Sure enough, it was like a glassy lake, the mountain reflected in it, and some would actually think that lake was the mountain. Some would jump in the lake to go to the mountain. They got so excited about it. Some of those that jumped in the lake actually drowned in the lake because they didn't know how to swim. And then people thought, wow, the evil spirits of the mountain. And they created all these bizarre stories around it. And one day, there was a stampede, and one of the guys got knocked down. He almost got trampled to death. And he's lying down on his back. He's looking up and saying, there it is. It's been here the whole time. Wow. He goes tell people. And nobody believes him. He said, you're crazy. That mountain's not there. Like Spirit's not here. See, all the centers of spiritual living today are going over what Ernest believed, that, Spirit is in and through all things. Well, but they didn't believe that it was right here. And so this guy said, I'm going to go climb this mountain on my own. I'm going. You guys don't have to believe me. And so he went off, and he started climbing this mountain. And it was steep, and it was arduous, and it was difficult, and his burdens would knock him over, and when he'd be losing sight, and he'd fall over, he'd look up, and he'd see the mountain. And what he noticed is everybody climbing that mountain, going up or going down, they all seem to have some kind of disabilities. They all seem to have some difficulties. They all seem to have some kind of burdens that would knock them down where they could look up. And he came to realize it's only like when you're down that you're able to look up. Because otherwise you're just so content, looking, doing, focused on creating what it is. This is your focus. You've got to begin to look up into the heavens, into the skies, into the greater possibilities in the Spirit that is ever available to us. It's there. But we're caught up in our stuff. You can't experience the thing itself when you're caught up in your drama. Brene Brown, remember we spent a few weeks with her in the summer here. She said that there's so many people that prefer to be in their disappointment than feel their way through the disappointment. They'd rather be in it, talk about it, tell you about it, explain it, analyze it, rather than to feel it and get done with it and leave it behind. And you know what? That was sad. It was disappointment. There were lumps there. It wasn't good. But you know what? It's there, and I'm on to something new in my life, and this is what I'm creating, because God and I create a majority here, because there is only one. There's not something outside that I'm praying to or I'm wanting to grasp or pull in, but rather I'm recognizing the presence is in the disappointments. The presence is in the difficulties. How do you use this stuff? Is you come to recognize wherever you are, that is the perfect opportunity for you to deepen your experience of the divine. But you got to notice it. You got to see it. There's a story that's told in the ministerial, conversations of a minister who just was asked to fill a pulpit. He got a letter of call to serve a congregation. And so on the day he was to start, nobody knew who he was yet. The selection team had hired him. And so he got there 30 minutes early. And he dressed up like a homeless guy. He got there early, and he kind of was disheveled. The hair was a mess, smudges on the face. And he tried to greet people coming in, out there on the street, inside. Nobody would have anything to do with him. He said there's only 3 people that actually looked at him when he said hello. He asked people for some change so he could buy food. Nobody gave him change. And so he came on in. He sat down in the front row, to which the ushers came and invited him to sit in the back instead. And as they went through the announcements and they greeted the new people, nobody greeted him. They kind of just looked at him. What are you doing here? Yeah, you don't fit in. It's not your place. And then the selection team came up and said, hey, I'm excited to say today we're going to share and introduce you to your new minister here. And everybody stood up and they were applauding. And then in the back row, this disheveled gentleman stood up and he walked down the aisle, and a hush came over the place. And he came up on the stage and he pushed his hair back and wiped the smudges off and straightened up his outfit. And then he just started espousing an eloquent passage from the Bible, like Matthew 25, where the king said to those on his right, you have been blessed by Spirit, for come and accept your inheritance that has been there since the day of creation. Because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I was without clothes, you clothed me. When I was sick, you looked at me. When I was in prison, you came to visit me. And they said, but King, Lord, it's like, when did we do this to you? And he said, just what you have done to the least of my brothers and sisters, you have done to me. Come, enter the kingdom. And let us remember that all are our brothers and sisters. The disheveled individuals out there on the streets, those disappointments in our life that we don't want to look at and to feel and to move through. They are all places in which the omnipresent, infinite expression of God is expressing. And what I've got to come to recognize is this is in my life. It's in my life. I don't know why it's in my life. It's like I would never call it into my life, but it's in my life. That means there's Spirit there. And Goethe, a German writer, philosopher from 1700s, mystic, he said, once you trust yourself, you'll know how to live. You got that? Once you trust yourself, I'll know which individuals I reach out to and I love and I talk to and I give them some change, the kind words I have to share. Buddha said, now the only thing left is for you to become yourself. See, that's what this philosophy is about. It's not about following some structure, rigid ways and disciplines, but it's about you bringing forth who you are. It's allowing your spirit to be seen, allowing that presence of God to be known, and spirit responds to that. Ernest, from this particular chapter we're working on, the thing itself, he writes about the responsiveness of spirit. He said, from this first chapter, he said, behind the individual is the universal which has no limits. You got that? Behind you is that which has no limits. But it's unexpressed unless it has a vortex, an avenue, a channel through which it expresses, which is why you're needed to God. If you didn't realize that, God's like nothing without you. Yeah, don't tell her that, but it's like you're needed. Otherwise, the created ideas that you have been given are unexpressed. So anyway, behind the individual is that which has no limits. In this concept alone lies the possibility of eternal and endless expansion. For the simple way to state the proposition is to say that we have a conscious mind that operates within a subjective field, which is creative. The conscious mind is spirit, and the subjective mind is the law. One is a complement to the other, and no real individuality could be expressed without the combination of both. You get that? You know, there is a law that responds. As I was saying, you can't see the law, but you can see what it does. You can't see gravity, but you can see what it does. It works. It's always there. And so there's this conscious mind that says, okay, I've got this vision that's stirring in my field of awareness. I'm not sure where it came from, but it's mine to do. And so I'm going to go do it. And all of a sudden you begin to carry that vision of the possibility. And what happens in this subjective field or in this creative medium is there is a responsiveness that begins to show you what is next for you to do. You don't need to know what you're going to do a year from now. What you need to know is what to do tomorrow about this vision or this idea for which you have been given. And it's not like you can't catch next year's possibility that goes with it. But what's essential is to find the courage to take that step that is necessary to bring about the infinite in a new way in your life. This is what the classes assist us with, is so we can begin to develop the consciousness in order for this to follow. Because you are that infinite. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's why you meditate. It's beyond words, but I try to put them in words every Sunday. I try to put them in words for us. But there's an old story of this doll that was made of salt. A salt doll, I guess, is what it would be. And it says it journeyed a great deal across the deserts and the lands and got to the edge and saw a new kind of land. And this land was wavy and it was movement and it was insecure and it was different. It had no concept of what this was. It says, what are you? And says, I'm the ocean. I'm the sea. And the salt doll says, so what's the sea? And he says, well, stick your foot in there. And so the salt doll sticks its foot in the sea and begins to get an inkling of, wow, I'm beginning to understand what the sea is. And it pulls the foot out. What happened to my toes? And the sea says, you have to give something in order to receive. You got to give up some of the old positions. You got to give up what you've been dragging. You got to give up to looking for who you need to hit because they have hit you. All of a sudden, you've got to give up what has been casting the precedent into your world. You got to give up what has been back there and begin to create from a new kind of place. And says, so how can I know more about you? And the sea says, well, come in more and more. And all of a sudden, this salt doll walked further and further and kept saying, and what is the sea? I begin to see. What is the sea? I want to know more what the sea is. What is the sea? Until it just totally merged into the sea and realized, I am that. That's right. That was like the end of the story, you guys. Yeah. I am that. And in that realization became the vastness became the limitlessness of the infinite possibilities that are forever there. But we have to get beyond the concept that the form is the truth. It's the physical truth. But it's not the truth of who you are. And the new religion says, well, the body responds like this. We must move beyond that. If this was class, one of the exercises I would do, we'd spend a lot of time on this. I'd move you through your body. I'd have you focus on your hand. And you can practice this at home. You go, but I'd have you look at your hand. And you look at your hand and I say, is that I? Or is that mine? I'd have you sit with that for a while. So you got a conscious realization that's not I, it's mine. Actually, I'd start with your feet. And have you think about your feet and your toes, and I go up your legs. And is that the I or is that mine? And you come to the experience. Because remember, this spirituality is not about me telling you, it's about the experience of the thing itself. You come to the recognition that, I am not contained by my shoe. I'm more than my shoe. I am conscious of my foot. I am conscious of my shoe. I am conscious of my hand. So what is that? Well, that's the great question. What is that? Who am I? What is conscious? And so you begin to take a look. Well, I can be conscious of my whole body. So I'm not my body. I'm conscious of this room. But I'm not the room. I can be conscious of this whole building. I'm not that. I can be conscious of my home. All of a sudden, what I recognize is I am consciousness. And what we want to do is to move up that mountaintop, that sacred mountain, and come to that higher perspective and realize that I am a consciousness that is operating in this world of form, and that I am not bound by form, but the form must respond to the consciousness that is using this body as a vehicle in this world. Because if God is absolute, if God is everything, if God is infinite, if God is all-powerful, it is joy, it is abundance, it is everything, it is not bound to any particular form. And if like that salt I dissolved into the absolute expression, I am that allness, and where I become conscious is where I bring the spirit into focus, into form, and I can be bound by what's going on in the world in which I walk, or I can bring forth a new thought into a new world and live in a new way and make a difference in the world in which I live and move and have my being. And so, you get stuck sometimes in the disappointment, head down to the beach and have that experience. Whales are spouting right now. They're all over the place. You can't miss them if you hang out there. You want that spiritual experience, have that. I'll sit there at night and look at the sky and the blackness of the sky and the stars, and like nothing changes, but everything changes within me. And I'll have it rough. I go hang out in the mountains in the snow and the silence that is deafening, and the trees as far as the eyes can see. And I sit there and I watch, and nothing changes. And yet everything changes inside of me. And as I begin to walk and step in this world, I begin to walk and sink and realize we're not bound. We're not bound by what seems so real in the physical. Tim tells a story of his dad who had Alzheimer's disease, and for 10 years it just became more debilitating, crippling, to the point the last several years his dad could never speak. He couldn't feed himself, couldn't dress himself. It was like a little baby that needed to be taken care of. And one day his mom was off at a grocery store. It was a Sunday. Mom at the grocery store. Tim and his older brother were sitting there watching a football game, and their dad was sitting in the room. And Dad just kind of collapsed over. He took this last wheezy breath, and they knew what just took place. Dad went gray. The color was gone. The breath was just like a last breath. And Tim's older brother, who's 17, tells Tim, who's 15, said, "Call 911 right now. Call, get some help." And they heard, Tim says, a voice that they hadn't heard for years. They don't even know how they recognized this deep voice that was their dad that said, "Son, don't call 911. Let me go. Tell your mom how much I love her. Please tell your mom how much I appreciate her and that I'm all right." And with that, he moved on. Tim went on to be a cardiologist. And he says that when someone dies in the home, oftentimes they'll do an autopsy, and they found that his dad's brain was completely jumbled up and mixed up from that disease that just went wild in his brain for 10 years, that there was no physiological way he could have spoken. And he spent his time in medicine and school studying and never found an answer how it was physically possible that his dad could have spoken to he and his brother. It's because they didn't teach consciousness. They didn't teach that there's something that animates this body that is not bound by this body. Number of times I have seen similar experiences just time before death, that someone from a coma wakes up and shares something. What I want us to get is that you're not this physical being. You are part of that infinite, absolute, inexhaustible expression. You're looking for better health, it's yours now. You're looking for a greater cash flow and you didn't win the Powerball last week, it's still yours now. It's like you got to have recognition. Let's say you won it and you never checked your tickets, and you got the winning ticket. What good does $1 billion do you if you don't have it? Well, that's what being conscious is. Being conscious that your bank account is filled, that you have been given your inheritance from the beginning of creation because you have chosen to see God in the homeless and the hungry and the sick and the tired. You've chosen to be a conduit through which that infinite passes into form. And you recognize that it is all spirit, that there is only one, and that one is the thing itself. Call it what you want, but you are of that. And your world is an opportunity to be that expression as you walk in this life. And when you're committed to that, there is no one and no thing that can stop you, because all things are spirit seeking to support its good as your very life. God bless you in this new expression of life.
cry for mercy and you long for grace. Feel the love, feel the light. Won't you come in from the cold? 'Cause all are welcome here. Feel the joy, feel the peace, and the comfort of home. 'Cause all are welcome here. Yes, all are welcome here. Here.
All Are Welcome Here, from the album Path of Light, was co-written by Peggy Lebo and Reverend Christian Sorensen. It's available at www.peggylebo.com.